All right, and there is live pictures, Greensboro, North Carolina. Kamala Harris just finished her second rally of the day. We saw her walk off stage during the commercial break. She has a few new lines in her stump speech, and it's worth noting those. We'll get to those and why they are significant, how they came out of the debate in a minute. Donald Trump wrapped up his rally in Arizona. He once led the state of Arizona by 6 points, and now he is tied. With that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. First tonight, crazy is as crazy does. Here's why. Arizona and North Carolina both highlight a huge and growing problem for Donald Trump. Hand-picked Trump acolyte and Arizona Senate candidate Kari Lake falsely claims she won the 2020 race for governor. She still spreads theories about the 2020 presidential election and claims Trump won. People in Arizona don't seem to like that very much. Lake is down 7 points in her race. Trump is tied with Kamala Harris. That's called a drag on the ticket. Remember, Trump was up 5 against Joe Biden. Let's move to North Carolina. The DDHQ polling average shows Trump led Joe Biden by 5% in North Carolina on the day Biden left the race. As of now, Harris leads Trump by 0.1%. It's as close as you get in North Carolina. Polling shows that Mark Robinson, the Republican candidate for North Carolina governor, is trailing his opponent by 11%. Could be a blowout. And Harris is there leading by 0.1. Robinson called the LGBTQ plus community filth. He's a Holocaust denier. He questions, among other things, the moon landing, 9/11, and JFK's murder. He supports the New World Order theory. In other words, he believes that elite globalists are trying to depopulate the globe and bring about, quote, end times. And he calls Beyonce's music satanic chants. Trump, for his part, once likened Mark Robinson to Martin Luther King Jr. Robinson is what you call an anchor on the ticket. And all of the above might have been fine, or at least survivable, when Trump was 6 points ahead of Joe Biden. But now, Harris is neck and neck across 7 swing states. The down-ballot craziness created by Donald Trump is an enormous problem. And Trump can't help himself. So not only does he not distance himself from the above crazies, he embraces it and doubles down. Tonight, Trump brought a guest with him. Well, he did yesterday, to the 9/11 anniversaries. Her name is Laura Loomer. So to the 9/11 anniversaries, Donald Trump brought with him a woman who calls 9/11 an inside job. One of her recent tweets, this is Laura Loomer, if Kamala Harris wins, the White House will smell like curry and White House speeches will be facilitated by a call center and the American people will only be able to convey their feedback through a customer satisfaction survey at the end of the call that nobody will understand. This is someone who regularly travels with Donald Trump. He wants her advice and he wants her next to him on the plane. She was with him on the plane before the debate. Put another way, Loomer is so crazy that MAGA Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene calls her racist. Yet Trump keeps Laura Loomer around. So, for all the Trump fans right now saying, but Harris, but Harris, but Harris, you right now are making my point. By doubling down, tripling down on crazy, Trump takes up all the oxygen in the room and gives the press a free pass to focus on him rather than her. Crazy is, to paraphrase Forrest Gump, as crazy does. We begin tonight with George Will, NewsNation senior political contributor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post. Mr. Will, always good to see you, sir. Once again, Donald Trump appears to be his own worst enemy.
Yes, people used to say, let Reagan be Reagan, let Truman be Truman, let their edges and their edginess come out. They were authentic, and in his own very different way, Donald Trump is authentic, and he's not going to be anything else. He got 28 minutes into his speech, convention speech in Milwaukee. Then he went on off the rails, and he's been off the rails ever since. And the amazing thing, Leland, is this. We've had 2 convulsive events, both debates. One knocked the president out of the race. The other changed the dynamic of the race. And nothing has changed in the electoral vote calculus. Before Biden was knocked out of the race, there were 7 states in play, apt to be decided by a small number of votes. 2 months later, what? It's still 7 states. So can you think of an 8th state that is now in play that wasn't before? The calcification of our politics is astonishing.
Well, fair enough. But I think reasonable people can agree Donald Trump was in a much better place against Joe Biden. He was winning a number of these states in the polls by 5-6%. And they were, I had Republicans talking to me about Minnesota and Virginia and New Hampshire, on and on and on. And now Democrats are playing the game on the other side, talking about Florida in the Texas Senate race. Is out there that might be. It shows that this race is much tighter for Democrats, much better for Democrats under Kamala Harris. The question, though, is there is this odd thing for Donald Trump, right? Because in the month when Joe Biden was the story, when somebody other than Donald Trump was the story, Donald Trump did quite well. From the first debate through when Joe Biden dropped out, Trump kept getting better and better polling-wise without doing anything.
To beat Joe Biden, all he had to do is come out on his front porch every morning to the assembled media and say, I'm not Joe Biden. Go back inside and slam the door and do the same thing the next morning. Stay out of sight. But he can't stay out of sight because applause and public acclaim is oxygen to him. Second, he does not have an update of his script on essential matters since he came down the escalator in Trump Tower in June 2015. The act gets stale, Leland.
Well, look, to be fair, he's sort of tossing out some new stuff, right? And at least today, he rolled out a brand new policy proposal of giving away money that the American people don't have. No taxes on overtime. Take a listen.
Cut taxes for working families, and we will have no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security benefits. I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime.
Now, here's my question. Will that policy proposal get the same type of scrutiny, okay, or will it get much tougher scrutiny than Kamala Harris's proposals of $25,000 for everybody to buy their first-time house, so every house costs $25,000 more?
And the $6,000 child tax credit and all the rest. We're in an uncommonly vulgar auction between these two candidates. Both of them giving away money and giving away government revenues, oblivious of the fact, Leland, that the day of the debate, the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, scrupulously fair, said that by the end of this fiscal year, that is the end of this month, the federal government will have a $2 trillion deficit. The economy's growing. We're at more than full employment. There are hundreds of thousands of unfilled jobs. And we're still running a deficit of $2 trillion a month. And these candidates are bidding with one another to see how much worse each of them can make it.
And with absolutely zero even thought about trying to deal with it or even care that it exists. Jim Clyburn, longtime supporter of Joe Biden, the man who gave Joe Biden really the presidency in 2020. He was on with Jake Tapper yesterday talking about Kamala Harris's new aggressive campaign that she's going to barnstorm the swing states. And he had one piece of advice for her. Take a listen.
If you go on these one-on-ones, sometimes you drill down into a question until there's a word that's uttered that can be used in a negative way. I just would like to see her out among the people, interacting with them in a town hall type setting.
I'm still trying to figure out how someone who wants to be leader of the free world has gotten away now for 50 plus days, and at least if she takes Jim Clyburn's advice, will for the next 50, by thinking that a one-on-one interview might be too difficult when she wants to stare down Vladimir Putin and promises to fix the American economy.
That's a fair question, but remember this, Leland. The people complaining about this are the American media, and the American media are vying with Congress for the title of the least approved institution in the United States. So people can complain about that, but what they look on their television in the evening and they see her in front of crowds and she's smiling and she's having fun, and some scold from the media comes on and says, yes, but I have some questions for her. I wish you'd sit down with me. And people say, how am I supposed to care about this? I think Claiborne is... Due respect,
Mr. Hold on, though. I mean, I understand that, and I would agree with you. The media has well earned, ourselves excluded, of course, present company excluded, well earned the lack of approval and unpopularity and distrust. And look, no shame for Kamala Harris and her team that they're doing what they're supposed to do. She doesn't do well in interviews. Being questioned about, why have you gone from wanting to ban fracking and suing frackers to now saying I'm all in, among many, many questions. Do you still believe in private health care? Or why'd you change your views? All those are fair. She won't answer them. I would beg to differ, because I'm old enough to remember during the Trump administration when the media spent an awful lot of time talking about how Donald Trump wasn't giving enough interviews or wasn't talking to them or was playing too much golf or would only go to rallies or would only talk to friendly media organizations. It seemed to work pretty well for him then.
It did, and I think Claiborne believes, and I think he's right, that if her job is to get to 270 electoral votes, she ought to stay with what she's doing right now. If polls begin to indicate that people are sharing the mainstream media angst about her not sitting down for one-on-one interviews, then they can change. But right now, keep on keeping on if you're Harris.
Right, no, if you're her, but
so far it's working.
Do you think does the media right? But does the media seem to have that angst to you? Because I don't see stories every night on the nightly newscasts, which still are the most watched newscasts by the general populace and certainly by people who vote, about the dangers of having a president who doesn't talk to the media, the threat to democracy of shutting journalists out. Today, the big question from the media pool, the press pool that follows her was, are you excited to get back on the campaign trail? That's not hard-hitting journalism.
No, it's not. And we'll see if come October this begins to become an issue. But I don't think people have made the connection that you are sensibly making, which is if she can't talk to Leland Vittert, she can't talk to people in the media, how can she talk to Xi and to Putin and all the rest? But until people make that connection, she's going to try and skate as long as she can on the gosh, this is fun and I'm having a great time.
I want to get you real quick before we go, because she is having a good time. She had a great debate, certainly better than Donald Trump. And today, Donald Trump, and I'm trying to figure out the logic of this, said there will be no third debate. Take a listen.
Because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate. It's too late anyway. The voting's already begun. You got to go out and vote. We got to.
I'm trying to figure out why the crowd roared in approval, because if they think Donald Trump did so well in the debate, why wouldn't they want him to have another one?
If he said the moon was made of blue cheese, they'd have cheered. That's the kind of people who go to his rallies. The important thing here is he's now set up a recurring theme from Kamala Harris. He lost, he's a loser, he's weak, he's afraid of me. And I think it's going to get under his skin. That's half of her campaign strategy, is to torment him. And This gives her ammunition to do that.
Right. And look, CBS News, for at least their part, put out a debate proposal. NewsNation's ready to host a debate. So if he changes his mind, which I think you point out he very well might, here we go. Mr. Will, good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you, Leland.
Yes, sir. Kamala Harris supporters and her friends in the media can't understand why people support Donald Trump. Well, we have news for you. The story of Springfield, Ohio, the place where Trump claims Haitian immigrants eat pets, explains everything. As predicted, the national media descended on Springfield, Ohio, small town, forgotten by everybody, to prove Haitian immigrants aren't kidnapping and eating pets. They cared a lot about Springfield, Ohio, because they could use it to call Donald Trump racist. And as we predicted last night, the national media has now moved on from the city. Here's a little bit from NBC Nightly News.
Former President Trump spreading unfounded claims that members of the growing Haitian population in Springfield, Ohio, are abusing pets. City officials say there's no evidence of that. On the ground in Springfield, we found deep tensions.
It's just to me discrimination and xenophobia and bigotry and racism.
So the rest of the media is now done with Springfield and the people living there. They certainly don't care about the Haitians and their plight. But we have not moved on, because the problems of Springfield still exist. And those folks vote. 20,000 Haitians arrived in a town of nearly 60,000. No town can deal with that. Happened in just the past couple of years. With them came exploding poverty, not just for the Haitians, but also for the locals. Drug overdoses, fentanyl overdoses have exploded. Crime up 100%. Car accident epidemic, because the Haitians are able to get driving licenses without ever taking a driving test. There is a housing crisis and a school overcrowding crisis, all brought about and all fully explained yesterday in our segment about Springfield. There's a lot of money that the immigrants are bringing in to an area that was pretty inexpensive to live, and therefore locals now can't afford housing.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's one of the primary things I became aware of. I didn't realize the connection, but a couple years ago, the rent started skyrocketing 40, 60%. I knew a lot of people who couldn't find homes in town and still can't. They're doubling up with family or living outside of town, and even those options are drying up.
Springfield's on I-70, for those of you who don't know it, between Dayton and Columbus. It's the definition of forgotten America. And across America, across Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, certainly in North Carolina, there are hundreds of Springfields. In Georgia, add those, maybe thousands. It was the less disdain for voters like those in Springfield, Ohio, a.k.a. the deplorables who elected former President Donald Trump in 2016 and might elect him again. Geraldo Rivera is with us now, Ohio resident, NewsNation correspondent at large, Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist. I don't know about you. I'm not a media critic. You're better at this, and you've been around longer than I am. I find the lack of caring about the people in Springfield, Ohio, both disgusting and telling, because the only time anybody has cared about them in the past few years is when they could use it against Donald Trump.
Well, it's a very compelling story when you're talking about Haitians coming into a town, taking over the town, and then kidnapping all the pets. That whole story, that absolutely bizarre, made-up, fake story is so outrageous. And it plays in, you were talking about how the big media, how mainstream media is seizing on it to prove racism. On the other hand, you had the right wing of the political spectrum seizing on the pet eating to show the foreignness, to show how traditional values in America are being trampled or devoured in this case.
But aren't we ignoring, though, the real... We're obsessed, though, with this concept about pets, okay? And I would say it doesn't really matter. Does Donald Trump say outrageous things? Absolutely. But you've got 60,000 Americans who are being put through hell, for lack of a better term, okay? It's not their fault, certainly. And it may not be the fault of these 20,000 people who've showed up. But there is real and enormous problems that are being completely and totally ignored. Summary crime reported by the Springfield Police Department, 2012 to 2022. They have had 100% increase in crime in just a couple of years. That's a real problem. I get maybe it's not as good at TV, but it's certainly important, wouldn't you say?
I do think it is important, and I applaud our wonderful governor, my friend Mike DeWine, who, after rebutting and discarding that whole pet eating ridiculousness, as you have indicated, sent state aid to Springfield. So whatever it takes, I'm glad that the spotlight has shined on this community, and I'm glad that someone is doing something about it, because the immigrant overload, as you correctly point out, no community could sustain that dramatic population infusion. It would totally change the character of any community. It was nonsense and insensitive to begin with.
You've called it nonsense. You've called it ridiculous. You've called it silly. You've called it all these things that Donald Trump said that Haitians were eating pets. But at least in terms of those voters, right? If we want to just look forward rather than look back, if you're those voters in Springfield, Ohio, you say the only reason there's been any attention paid, the only reason Mike DeWine's sending in the highway patrol, the only reason people are telling our story is because Donald Trump stood up for us. Kamala Harris says, oh, just deal with it. These are newcomers that need to be welcomed with government debit cards.
Regardless of what the catalyst is, let's just applaud the fact that let's make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Yes, there's been this tumult, this earthquake that has rattled this old town. But the fact of the matter is, it is, as you point out, illustrative and instructive. This is now, let's make it a model for how you deal with this. You're not going to expel the 20,000 who have settled there. And I do disagree a little bit about why they came. They didn't come uninvited. There were advertisements about affordability.
No, that's a good point.
There were advertisements about the Honda plant and the Dole
Well, there were advertisements by jobs. There were people
jobs
who got them a lot of money. Yeah, no, 100%. Okay, there is a contrast.
That is the American dream.
There's a contrast here, though, between the focus on something crazy that Donald Trump said, and now we will play some of the clips that have come out recently or resurfaced recently about Kamala Harris when it relates to using taxpayer money to pay for transgender surgeries of prisoners in jail and confiscating guns. Take a listen.
Adding to your gun control agenda?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. My agenda includes attempting to get Congress to act, but if they don't within the first 100 days of my administration, I'm going to take executive action.
I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need.
Just in terms of sort of outrageous and offensive to American and traditional values, I think there's a lot of people who would find that equally offensive to immigrants being accused of eating pets, right?
I don't want to make a comparison. I will say this, that I am baffled by the emotional investment in the transgender community. Not that there aren't legitimate needs and desires and a real community there. Whatever is going on, I don't know. I'm not an expert in transgender, although I did a couple of shows about it during my old daytime talk show days. But the notion that taxpayers are paying, it's the same thing when you see that kind of situation with the military. In the context of the military. It is very, very offensive to ordinary people who don't, just like me, reasonable, ordinary, normal people who don't truly understand, who don't grasp what the real issue is. Now, there are undoubtedly legitimate people who are transgender, that have real needs, medical, psychological, and otherwise, who are arrested, and they deserve the same kind of care and treatment as any other inmate.
Okay.
But to have extraordinary
to make it a policy
lavish
platform.
And
yeah.
It seems I'm not exactly sure what the goal is.
I'm not. Well, the goal is to appear more liberal than everybody else, which is what you wanted to do in 2019, which was running for president. But you have done shows on the issue. I have not, so I will defer to your expertise, my friend. It is good to see you.
You too, Leland. Thanks.
All right. You remember all those Donald Trump warnings about mail-in voting? Well, they might be proving true. The new warning about how the post office could screw up 2024 and create a whole new set of problems. You might say, here we go again. Another election and another chance for results to change in the days, maybe even weeks after the polls close. More people than ever are going to vote by mail this election. That's just an indisputable fact. 36 states allow vote by mail for any reason. Emphasis on the word mail. Mail gets delivered by the U.S. Postal Service that evidently hasn't been doing such a great job. Shocking. The National Association of Secretaries of States just wrote a big letter, quote, over the course of the last year, election officials across the country have raised serious questions about processing facility operations, lost or delayed election mail, and frontline training deficiencies impacting USPS's ability to deliver election mail in a timely and accurate manner. Got that? In other words, the results could be one thing on election night. A few days later, things might change. Seems like that happened before, like 4 years ago. Mail-in voting in key swing states can change everything. 2020 Pennsylvania, 2.6 million used mail-in ballots. Total votes 6.9 million, 37.7% mail-in voting. In Arizona, that was an important state. 2.5 million used mail-in ballots. Total votes 3.4 million, 73.5% used mail-in voting. With us now, Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science, Decision Desk HQ, Kurt Bardella, NewsNation contributor and Democratic strategist, and Jessica Anderson, President of the Sentinel Fund. Welcome, one and all. All right, Tranter. This seems to be setting up the concept that it is going to be a long time till we know the results after Tuesday night, number one. And number two, trying to pre-butt the idea that there are shenanigans going on?
Well, let's take the first one. The western states like Arizona, Nevada, California, Washington, those states always take a long time to count. That's been happening for decades now, so we should expect that. The states on the East Coast, they took a long time in 2020 because they didn't have that, they didn't expect that kind of influx of mail. I can tell you from the primaries this year, they've gotten a whole lot better. States like Pennsylvania, I expect to be done counting within 24 to 36 hours after close of election. If it's very close, it's going to take a little longer because they have those provisional ballots and things. They've gotten their act together.
Kurt, how much are Democrats planning on this of the curing ballots, the harvesting ballots, all legal, but certainly the Democratic machine in 2020 that did this pretty well and then in 2022 gives you guys, a structural advantage?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I'm old enough to remember when I was Republican, as Scott would like to say, when the mail vote, absentee vote, was our strength as Republicans. We banked on that, actually, to win a lot of races. I worked on a race in 2006 that because of mail-in voting, we actually ended up winning. And now it's kind of the reverse of that because what we saw in 2020, Democrats, because partly we were in a pandemic, went all in on using all of their GOTV resources for mail-in.
Is get out the vote.
Getting out the vote, voter contact, for mail-in voting, while the opponents, much to the chagrin of a lot of down-ballot Republicans, Donald Trump was saying, you can't trust the mail. Don't do it by mail.
Well, so he's kind of changed his tune, right? So we have Trump on mail-in voting. Take a listen.
This will be the most important election in the history of our country. So whether it's mail-in ballots, early voting, voting on the day, you got to get out and vote. If you have mail-in voting, you automatically have fraud. They want to restart the COVID hysteria so they can justify more lockdowns, more censorship, more illegal drop boxes, more mail-in ballots.
See, these guys are here just because they're good looking. You're here because you actually have something to say on this. The Sentinel Action Fund runs the ground game for the Senate races, and you think about those are the same in the swing states. We've got North Carolina, Georgia. Obviously, you guys have a big operation in Arizona, a huge operation in Pennsylvania. How worried are you about this situation?
So, look, I think Republicans and conservatives need to be comfortable doing two things at once. Maintaining our calls for election integrity, strengthening our laws, but then also realizing that we need to utilize the rules as they exist on the ground. So there's no reason Republicans can't utilize mail-in ballots, early vote, ballot harvesting, third-party ballot collection. But every single state is different. And so I think that's actually what we're going to see come, 6.5, 7 weeks from now, that voters aren't going to wait until Election Day because of messages like President Trump and our Senate candidates that have said, no, it's okay to embrace early and mail-in balloting. It's okay. It's more convenient. You can skip the line. Our military does it. It's safe for them. It can be safe for you. And then I think President Trump actually said it best when he said, if you vote early enough, you can overcome a perceived margin of fraud. And then he took that and said, make it too big to rig. So I think we have a lot of momentum on our side.
It almost sounds like vote early and often, right? That's Chicago.
But that's not what he's saying. He's not saying vote often, but it's okay to vote early and be comfortable in the early time period.
All right, fair enough. There is sort of an odd situation happening. North Carolina is one of the states, obviously, that this is becoming a huge issue. Arizona, another place that it is a huge issue in terms of the mail-in vote. I think there was 40%. Big things have changed in Arizona. DDHQ polling shows Trump led Joe Biden by 6% in Arizona on the day Biden left the race. As of now, it is all square, Harris and Trump in Arizona. Scott, trends are things that continue. Has Harris's momentum stopped?
It's certainly solidified and it's plateaued, but I think it's plateaued exactly where America is. This is a 50-50 race. You know, Donald Trump is going to get tens of millions of votes. Harris is going to get tens of millions of votes. It's going to come down to tens of thousands of votes in about 6 or 7 states.
All right. So there you go. Blake Berman made a great point that at the speech today, the rally we're looking at video of, it was not border banners that were up. It was all about the economy. Trump just in Tucson today had yet another no taxes on plan. Take a listen.
I will massively cut taxes for working families, and we will have no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security benefits. I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime.
All right, so Bardella, Harris stole the no taxes on tips. How long till she steals no taxes on overtime?
Hey, I mean, I actually have no problem with that
Imitation
policy. Let's just see a serious form of flattery.
Okay.
I mean, how about no taxes on anything at this point? I mean, we're going to see this for the next 54 days. Pandering. Just saying anything because both candidates, both parties know there is no scenario where they're going to get all these things done with the type of Congress that's going to be delivered to them in January.
People know that, too. The voters are smart about that, aren't they? Right?
Yes, but also voters want to know your vision for America. And this is what puts Trump, I think, actually ahead of the momentum post this Kamala Harris, bump after her DNC convention is he can say these things and he can say, I kind of did some of these crazy things the first time I was in office. You know what to expect from me. The substance is real. Your life was better. It was more secure. Your cost of living was down. Trust me. And I'm going to do some of these innovative policies.
Your first time, that means you get the last word.
There we go. Thanks for having me.
All right, gentlemen. Thanks for being here.
We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back.
There you go.
Attorney General Merrick Garland promises not to use the Department of Justice for political purposes. That was the thing today that he said. I'll tell you why that means absolutely nothing. Dare I remind you of 2016, when Hillary Clinton looked to be a sure thing, and then James Comey sent an email to Congress about her emails.
The FBI has just sent a letter to Congress informing them that they have discovered new emails pertaining to the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's investigation.
We are 11 days out from perhaps the most important national election of our lifetimes.
Boy, they both look different from 10 years ago. Former FBI Director James Comey changed the 2016 election, then wrote a book about it. Today, Attorney General Merrick Garland promised not to do the same.
There is not one rule for friends and another for foes, one rule for the powerful and another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, or different rules depending on one's race or ethnicity.
All right, with us now, former federal prosecutor Shan Wu, counsel to then Attorney General Janet Reno, Clinton administration. Welcome back. Thank you very much. All right. Look, I'm paranoid. That's just sort of what journalists are. You don't believe in coincidences. If there are not different rules, if you're not going to get involved in the election as Merrick Garland, why give a speech about it?
Yeah, so I will never question the AG's personal integrity, but he seems really politically tone deaf. Making a statement like this, I've criticized him before for saying, I'm so apolitical, and yet it ends up having a political effect. Same concept here. But 2 days after the debate, 54 days before the election, why now to make this statement reaffirming to the entire department, inviting everyone into the Great Hall of Justice? It's very tone deaf.
Well, it's tone deaf, but what is it? Why is he doing it? Is it foretelling something? Is he trying to pre-butt that there's going to be some big announcement and he wants to say, look, I promised it was going to be the same rules for everybody and thus I must make it? I'm trying to figure out what's coming.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to know, but it seems to me that there is a lot of concern about security around the election right now and possible even post-election violence.
Right.
And I know that the department's been gearing up for that, and I think he wants to sort of send a message out to the employees to say, hey, this may be a tough time coming up. I got your back. So, nice message.
So that may be, okay, that's the best best way to look at it, and people are granted the benefit of the doubt. There's this window, though, 54 days. You mentioned that number, really important. Because it used to be that 60 days out, you did absolutely nothing, right? Has that changed now?
No. I mean, there are cases that are already in the pipeline, so they can continue forward. But, yeah, like for he to suddenly announce a new indictment or anything like that, that would be not something that would be within the policy guidelines.
So I went and looked at the calendar, right? This is September, I think it's the 13th, the 12th. Friday the 13th, tomorrow. Deadline for Jack Smith's case in the January 6th case, the new January 6th case. Business Insider reporting Jack Smith's team must file briefs on Trump's immunity by September 26th. It may include now new evidence that would be made public. Grand jury testimony, possibly call logs, all these other things that it might include. How can you file something that clearly would have political implications ahead of the election, that would be evidence that you wanted to introduce that basically because of the Supreme Court ruling you couldn't? Does that get around this no different rules for anybody, we're not going to play politics?
Well, it certainly gets around the 60-day rule because, as we were discussing, it's already a case that's been charged, it's been moving forward. So the 60-day rule doesn't really mean that you have to have everything ground to a halt. Now, I have to say, I think it should progress forward. I think it should have gone faster. But I do have to say that if the Attorney General was really concerned about looking completely hands-off, you might want to just take a pause here because it's not, they're going to be right into October with Trump's reply to that. So no matter what's in there, it's going to have a political effect.
I'm paranoid just looking at the calendar, right? Because you give this speech saying, hey, look, there's no different rules for anybody. And then September 26th rolls around and you drop all this stuff and you say, hey, look, we had to do it. We couldn't ask for an extension. Therefore, no same rules for everybody. Am I too out of bounds here?
No, you're not too out of bounds. There's some steps because if they are referencing grand jury material, that's going to be initially under seal. There'll be some moves that have
and let's be real about this. If the government and Trump's lawyers came to the judge and said, look, we would like to extend this until after the election because it's not good for anybody and it's not good for justice to do this before the election, everybody'd say okay, right?
I think so. I think the judge would defer if both sides came to an agreement on that. Yeah.
Well, we'll see if it happens. It's good to see you as always. Thank you, my friend. One of the craziest special forces raids in history just happened. How Israel kidnapped Iranian rocket engineers and what Israel will do with them when we come back. Tonight, brand new video shows the moment the Israeli Defense Forces blew up a missile production facility, an Iranian facility inside of a Syrian mountain. It supplied very sophisticated rockets and missiles to Hezbollah. The explosions were part of an operation that included a daring raid into Syria by Israeli special forces. They built it into a mountain so you couldn't hit it from the air. U.S. and Israeli officials say the unit flew a helicopter 125 miles out over the Mediterranean, past Lebanon, and into Syria, raided the facility, took a number of Iranian scientists reportedly hostage, and then blew up the facility, all in about an hour. Jack Carr's here, former Navy SEAL sniper, spent 20 years with the teams and joins us now. He's the author of the book Targeted Beirut, the 1983 Marine barracks bombings, the untold origin story of the war on terror. And Hezbollah, obviously, is the group that was responsible and has the blood of so many Marines on its hands. Jack, I'm just fascinated by this in so many ways, but also that it's the Israelis finally delivering justice to the Iranians and to Hezbollah for what you wrote about.
It is, and this is one of those missions that everyone in special operations wants to be on. This is the one that you train up for. If it's not a hostage rescue, then it's something like this. And it'll be one that's studied for a long, long time. But to go in, I think they had 18 killed. I read that it's 2 to 4 Iranian scientists that they captured, destroyed this facility that couldn't be destroyed from the air. So they had to go to the special operations route, get a treasure trove of intelligence, and also hit a Russian communications center because Syria and Russia have a longstanding relationship. And they use drones, apparently. I read one report where they use drones after the Israeli special operations forces are on the ground going in, and Syrian forces are coming to reinforce on target, and they hit them with drones. So it was a very well planned out operation. And from all reports, it seems to have gone off exactly the way the Israelis want.
Absolutely remarkable. I'm wondering, as you look at this, and you've studied Hezbollah and Iran, are they starting to, I don't want to say take a step back, but starting to realize that the Israelis are unleashing on them things they never thought were coming?
Well, Israelis have gone into Syria dozens, probably hundreds of times that we, and some that we probably don't even know about over the past few decades. But really since the early 80s, Israel and the United States have been playing by Iran's rules. Iran has been using proxy forces. They tested that out in the 70s, early 80s. It worked for them. They got the end result they wanted, particularly when we talk about the U.S. response after 1983 and the bombing on October 23rd, 1983. We talk tough, but leave quietly in early 1984. So they got the result that they wanted. And ever since then, the U.S. and Israel have been playing by those rules, by Iran's rules. Over the years, Israel
now the rules are changing.
Operations. Yep, and Israel's done that over in Tehran recently, and as we saw just hours ago.
Yeah, gutsy. Jack, thank you very much. We appreciate it. It's good to be with you.
Thanks so much.
I promised you we were not giving up on Springfield, Ohio. What's going on there goes far beyond what Donald Trump is saying. The real story with the mayor of Springfield on Cuomo.